Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 85th anniversary of the Institute of Design. And I'm really pleased to have everybody here, especially the people on the stream. And so to celebrate our 85th anniversary. Today's event is focused on ID Academy, which I will get to in a second. Before that, let me introduce myself. Some of you may know me. My name is Anijo Matthew, and I am the interim dean of the Institute of Design here at Illinois Tech. At the Institute of Design, we have always been a very big force in education, especially in the education of design-led innovation. We were founded in 1937, and since then, we have focused on how design can change the field of technology, business, art, photography, and other disciplines. In 2020, we decided to divide the school up into 3 legs. And today we have 3 legs of the school, of the Institute of Design, that I'm proud to present. So the first leg is the graduate school of the Institute of Design, which is the degree granting body. This is where students come to get their degrees, they go through programs, and so on. The second leg of the Institute of Design is action labs, where our faculty take cutting edge research and apply it into real world problems. Today, I'm proud to launch the third leg of the Institute of Design, which is ID Academy. The Academy is where we take the knowledge that is generated through action labs, applied in our classes by our students, and then disseminated to the external world, to organizations and everybody around who is interested in that knowledge. So this is our mechanism for making the knowledge at the Institute of Design more widely available to everybody in the world. We have been trying out ID Academy for the last 1 year in stealth mode with a few selected partners. Today, we are launching this for everyone. And one of the big differences between ID Academy and other executive education programs is that we are very much focused on advancing design concepts within organizations and interested in immediate applicability. This is not esoteric content that a faculty member comes and talks to you about. These are application-oriented ideas that you can take and apply the next day at your work. And this is why ID Academy is different from other executive education programs. We are very much focused on lifelong learning. We are not interested particularly in people who are trying to get to this topic for the first time. Per se, we are interested in everybody who is trying to get a little better at design-related topics within their workspace. You may be someone who has been working in the company for 15 years and have just realized that there are certain things that design brings to the table that you're interested in. Or you might be a fresh graduate who joined the company and has been asked to work with a design team or an innovation team and has been asked to think about design thinking. And so we are really positioning ID Academy for anybody within that spectrum. It could be someone in the C-suite down to someone who started at the company. And one of the big things for us here at the Institute of Design is we were one of the pioneers of human-centered design that eventually became design thinking. But ID Academy is not just about design thinking. We are going beyond design thinking. We are looking to other complex topics that design can address. And we have really good faculty members and teachers on the platform who can bring these concepts alive for you. Just take a look at the range of topics that we cover currently within ID Academy. Everything from design planning, to visualizing complexity, to behavioral design, to climate leadership, to how to use prototyping for strategy. Just think of what that brings to the table. It's not basic design thinking. This is not how to use design thinking in your organization. If you want that, we can do that. but this is about going to the next level. Figuring out, now that you know design thinking, what do we do with it? How do we innovate with it? How do we bring that knowledge into a service design project that you might be doing at the company? Increasingly, we are bringing new faculty members into our mix, including alums of the Institute of Design, people who are experts in their field. So for example, we are bringing in people like Stephanie Wade, who works in civic design and civic tech. Stephen Babbage, who was one of the presidential fellows at the White House, who is an alum of ID, we are talking to him about teaching civic tech. Brandon Schauer, who was one of the co-founders of a design consultancy, who is going to talk about behavioral design. And people who are at the edge of design and collaboration, like Kim and Santosh, who are bringing in courses about design in healthcare. So not only do we have established faculty members who do the work with corporations and organizations, we are also bringing in new thought leaders every day to make more content for the platform. This fall, between this fall and this spring, we're going to launch 3 new programs at ID Academy. And these programs are built around different offerings. The first offering is you can ask us to do lectures. These are for large groups of people who are interested in the topic. We can also do advanced training programs for very specific groups of people. So the first one for about 1,500 people maybe in your organization. The second one for very selected, let's say 20 or 25 people. And what we have learned is that it's not enough to do lectures and advanced training. Sometimes teams need one-to-one coaching and mentorship, and our faculty are available for that too. Once we do this, we are able to offer 3 things. 1, we can provide courses with course badges that will eventually lead up. These are non-credit courses, but will become credit-bearing in the future. We can offer toolkits and methods and techniques that your teams can use to build out design within your organizations. And a combination of course badges and toolkits lead up to certificates. And these certificates eventually ramp up to degrees. As I said, we've been experimenting with the program with several of our trusted partners. Look at the range of people that we have been testing this with. And it's an impressive array of organizations that have reached out to us for support and interest in our knowledge base. This summer, we're going to launch 3 new programs. The first program is around civic design, and we are planning to have a civic design certificate program for those designers who are interested in moving into the civic and policy space. We plan to have a healthcare design certificate program for those designers who are interested in moving from their current modes of working into healthcare design. And finally, we are going to have a series of courses that are designed specifically for people who are interested in advancing their design knowledge over the summer, which we are calling ID Academy Summer School. I'm also proud to announce that we are now partnering with a large tech consultancy, whom I shall not name at this moment, but we will be releasing that information very soon. I can tell you it's the largest tech consultancy in the world, and who is helping us take this information, this knowledge base and these courses to becoming 100% asynchronous. And once we do that, it creates this very interesting opportunity for your organization to come to us and say, let's take very constructed modular content that resides on the ID Academy platform, deliver it to, let's say, 100, 200, 300 people in your organization in the form of modular content that they can consume at their own pace, at their own time. And this includes interactive content, it includes summative, formative assessments, anything that you think is good for your organization. On top of that, we can also build and bring in your content into the platform in a way that the content that we provide is enriched by information about your products, your offerings, and your services. And at a higher order, we can even have people from your organization coming in as faculty members or in parts of the modules that we construct for you. So along with our faculty, you can have your faculty co-teaching. With all of this, the idea is that we can start to build a much richer, much more informative and asynchronous version of ID Academy that can be disseminated across multiple platforms for multiple organizations in different fields of work that are interested in design. And this forms the blueprint for other collaborative offerings. For example, we are working with our computer science program to think about what design-led cybersecurity might look like. Or we are working with our social science program to think about how game design might play a role in design. So things like that are on the books and are being driven by our Office for Continuing Education. The person who leads that is Jeremy Alexis, who is offering the course today, and we'll meet in a second. I want to end my session with a call to action, asking you to check out this new course that we are offering in May from one of our faculty members, Wesley Ashton, who is doing a course on climate leadership. And check this out on our website, id.iit.edu/executive academy. And with that, I want to introduce Jeremy Alexis, who is an associate professor at the Institute of Design and also the vice provost for professional education, professional and continuing education at Illinois Tech. Jeremy has been at ID for a very long time and has developed some of the core frameworks for design strategy and planning that we offer in our curriculum. Today, we asked Jeremy to take one such module that he uses for his ID Academy class and present that to you as a free online course. So with that, please join me in welcoming Jeremy Alexis to the stage.
Thank you so much, Inijo. To remove all cognitive dissonance for everybody, I wore the same shirt today as in my picture, so there's no transition there. I'm so excited about the launch of the ID Academy, and because we started out by talking about how this is the 85th anniversary of the Bauhaus, I wanted to point out that the Bauhaus is credited with so much innovative thinking related to new products and services and experiments in photography. But one of the things people often gloss over or miss is the pedagogical innovation associated with the Bauhaus. Now, I know that here I am, a faculty member, speaking about pedagogy, but bear with me here for a moment because it is super important. If you imagine that during the time of the Industrial Revolution, all of a sudden products and product design became available to people other than the ultra wealthy. So up to that point, if you were a designer, you were likely an apprentice to someone and watching them craft, and that's how you learned how to be a designer yourself. Because you were primarily just making products and events for very, very wealthy people or kings and queens, the scale was okay because there weren't that many products and services to design. If you look at the work of Leonardo da Vinci, actually that's one of the reasons why we don't have so many great paintings from that individual, because so much of his work was actually putting on birthday parties for very wealthy people with cool events and products. But the Industrial Revolution changed that. All of a sudden, working class people could afford new things. And that meant we had to train an entire new generation of designers, which is where the pedagogical innovation of the Bauhaus came into play. And what you see here is a class. Now today, this seems very normal to us. All of those of you who are in design school experience this kind of studio culture. It's part of how we work. It's part of what we do. But this is quite innovative and different because no longer was it possible just to have one or two apprentices to a very senior designer. Now all of a sudden we had 30 or 40 students in the room, and we had to build a pedagogy that allowed us to teach that many students and have them have that same level of craft as we would if it was a one-on-one relationship. So they created this concept of critique, right? The studio culture, where we put our work in front of a large audience and everyone gives feedback on what to make better and how to improve it, right? And that pedagogical innovation was a way that design helped to scale up. We're at another interesting point, though, 85 years later, I would say, where all of a sudden design needs to scale up again. And this is because it's becoming more and more important at the companies and organizations that we work with. People want to be more creative in their work. They want to work more collaboratively. They want to work in more of an agile way. And the tools of design and design thinking are aligned with all of those goals. But how do we teach hundreds or thousands of people at an organization how to do these things, right? The critique method is wonderful, but it doesn't scale up to that level. That's why we're so excited about this partnership with our partner in the tech field, who's going to help us build a truly asynchronous way to teach these things. So now all of a sudden we're going to be able to scale in a way that we've never been able to scale before at the Institute of Design. The way I like to think about it, in an organization, you want everyone to know a little bit about finance. You're still going to have accountants, you're still going to have people in M&A, but it's helpful if everybody at the organization understands finance. I think the same thing is true with design. Right? We're still going to have designers, we're still going to have folks in user experience, but it's so important that everybody has that little bit of design thinking, that little bit of design doing in their DNA, so that they work faster, they work more collaboratively, and they're more creative. Now, one of the things that we love to talk about in user-centered design is the idea of empathy, right? Of deeply understanding our users. And we always try to discriminate between what's sympathy and what's empathy. Right? Sympathy is we feel sorry for someone, but empathy is like we understand them. We have this deep, profound way to describe their experience. We may not agree with it, but we can describe it. And for a long time, that's been the focus of design. But as we move from just talking about users to stakeholders, we've also seen an expansion of the research inputs that we're trying to teach and fold into the work that we do at the Institute of Design and the Academy. So we're starting to build not just empathy, but we're also starting to think about context, right? What's everything that's happening around the user, the stakeholder? What are the parts of the system that they interact with? How are trends shaping their experience? And in addition to that, we've added a third area, which is foresight. So now we understand the user, we understand their context, but now we really want to understand deeply what future trends are happening and how those trends are going to affect, not just in present day, but in the not so distant future, what our stakeholders and users are thinking, feeling, doing, and saying. So when we think about the transformation of the ID Academy with the organizations we work with, we really help them start to build in these three approaches to understanding their customer, to understanding their user, and building stakeholder research, right? Empathy, which is who are the users, what do they need? The context, everything that's happening around them. And then finally, foresight, what's happening in the future. Now you can imagine that we have many, many deep analytical and robust methods to help organizations get to a profound understanding in each of these three areas. But I will say, just as sort of a quick check, right, as you start to develop a new product or service, it's really helpful just to say, do I have empathy for the people I'm designing for? Do I understand their context? Do I have a sense of what those future directions are, the distant early warning signals about what's changing, so that I can put in place today new products that become a bridge to the future rather than barriers to the future? So when we do our academy training, we're really focused on helping organizations build tools and tradecraft in these three areas. Now, some of the methods you're very familiar with, like ethnographic interviews, we've also added a lot of work related to things like trend identification, pattern analysis, and even state-of-the-art tours, where we help to bring people to great places to see how others are doing work in similar fields and how they might transfer it over to their own practice. Of course, we're always interested in experiences. And it's as true today as it was 20 years ago. as it was 40 years ago. Businesses can always have a deeper, closer, better understanding of their customers. And it's not that we're doing anything wrong necessarily, it's just that customers change, right? The amount of change that's happened in terms of behavior, in terms of the way that we interact with the world, has been so significant in the last 20 years that it's often hard for us to truly understand the implications of those changes. That's why continually refreshing your understanding of your stakeholders, your customers, and users is so important to businesses that want to grow and compete. We think right now there are kind of three areas that have emerged, and I would almost say that these are a renaissance, right? We've known these for years, but they're becoming more and more important as we begin to build in deeper ways to understand users into the practices of the companies that we work with. The first is this idea of modes of behavior. Now, a mode of behavior is describing sort of the approach, the thoughts, the feelings of the way someone is behaving at a certain point. Now, what's interesting is throughout the day, we will probably all be in several different modes of behavior, right? The mode of behavior I'm in when I'm presenting is very different than the mode of behavior I'll be in when I'm commuting home or when I'm eating lunch. But the reason why modes of behavior are becoming more and more important is because so many of the big companies that we work with have become actually quite sophisticated at the use of personas, right? So we're all familiar with personas, this idea that we can have 5 or 6 of them. The personas then act as a mechanism to help us move that individual, and they become a stand-in for our users as we begin to design new services and ideas. And businesses have become very adept at using those to create new ideas, new services. However, we're starting to see a limit, right? Because the companies that we work with, all the personas, they started out very distinctive, but they're all starting to merge. And if you go to one tech company to another tech company, you'd be surprised at how similar those personas are, and that's why so many offerings are starting to feel very similar and overlapped. Modes of behavior offers a different perspective. This is where we say, personas are great and we're going to continue to design for them. But now we need to understand the different modes that someone is in when they're interacting with our business, with our service, with our products. The original my original work with this came many, many years ago when we were working with the office furniture company that we all know and love. And what we realized was that the customers were approaching their sales teams in different modes, right? Sometimes they wanted an entire redesign of their office space. Sometimes they just needed a new chair. But their sales strategy was so generic at the time that people were getting the same pitch whether they wanted a chair or a whole new environment, right? So a lot of work was done to say, what mode is our customer in? How do we target our approach to make sure that we're meeting them at that mode and solving the needs of that mode? A lot of this work you probably are familiar with. You can start to see at airports these days, right? What's so much fun about airports is it doesn't matter if you're the most experienced, United Global Services level passenger customer or someone who's taking their first flight. If all of a sudden your flight is horribly delayed and you didn't plan on it being delayed, right, you're in the same mode. And we can start to design for those types of modes that cut across different personas and starts to create some really interesting new value for the organizations that we work with. And it becomes distinctive compared to what they're doing today. The second area that we focus on, and you're probably all familiar with this term, but again, it's a renaissance. We're bringing it back because it's more important than ever, is this idea of moments of truth. Understanding those few peak or critical moments where your customer is interacting with your service or product and almost overwhelming them with wonderful design about how that works. This is some great work from the folks at Air New Zealand who have created a wonderful sort of lay flat bed in coach when 2 people are sharing an aisle, right? That's the moment of truth. Can I fall asleep on an airplane, right? I personally have only done it a few times when I wasn't trying to fall asleep, but that is sort of a critical moment that if an airline can figure out how to make that moment of truth happen and service it over and over again, that's going to be a key differentiator and a key distinguisher for that organization. So we really are working with a lot of the organizations, and I suggest you think about what are those moments of truth, right? How do we make sure that we align our resources and focus our resources so that we're winning at those particular places? Do we have the research to understand when the moments of truth happen? Do you understand how our competitors work with them and how we're different? The final, and one of the most favorite frameworks at ID, is the 5E framework, right? When I first started in design, it wasn't 5 E's, it was 4 E's with attraction at the start of it. But then somewhere down the line, someone figured out, hey, if we changed attraction to enticement, now we've got a 5E framework, so that was wonderful. And you can see that I'm at Kaplan today, and I guarantee you that in one of the design studios around us, there are students, ID grads, don't worry, this is happening as we speak, ID students using the 5E framework somewhere. It's still part of our DNA, and it's as relevant now as it ever was. But sometimes our clients get a little sort of mixed up in the exit and entrance, and a lot of the big companies that we're working with, instead we're focusing on helping them understand attraction and extension, because those are often the two parts of an experience that are under-designed and under-leveraged. Right, so the example that I'm showing here is a nod to those of you who enjoy football. There's a lot of complexity in this particular image related to American football, and Bill Belichick having a cheese head superimposed at his desk there. But the idea here is that when a great experience happens, right, we take with us something, right? It comes back. It's something that we keep at our desk on a Monday morning that reminds us of what that great experience was the weekend before. And because so much work has been done in service design and in persona design of that actual engagement that people have with services, we're starting to see that businesses need to focus more than ever on the attraction and the extension, because that's where they can win and they can differentiate. Great experience is almost table stakes in the middle, right? But how do you start to win at those two ends? We've always known that to be important, but it's much more important now. So I think that these are the types of things that we like to talk about with our Academy clients. We love to build tools and projects and resources to help people achieve these. And then we even like to help our Academy clients think about how do we measure and even build into performance reviews the type of activities related to helping incentivize and motivate and support their teams to make sure they do this type of work, this type of thinking, as they put pen to paper and they start to innovate. But one of the things that we see over and over again at organizations that are trying to innovate is an increased need, to go back to the image that we started with, an increased need to improve critique, right? We want to know, as leaders, as managers, how are we showing up to meetings? What do our teams think of us when we're finished? In terms of, are we giving them good critique? Are we giving them good direction? Right? Are we in a culture where the managers and leaders just think they have to be critical because that's their job? Or are they actually giving meaningful, directional, and usable critique that's helping accelerate and advance the projects? So over the last few years, we've put together and we leveraged this very simple model for how to give critique. So this is the last tool we'll share with you today, but I think it's one of the most powerful ways to help engage and develop a culture of design within your organization, is to teach people about how to give good critique. Sometimes we've seen a lot of television shows, right? A lot of reality television, there's good and bad critique going on. We don't necessarily want to model that. In this case, what we want to model is this very simple 4-step process. And it's one of those things that it's sort of, if you think about any sort of simple process, if we execute it consistently, over time it will have a massive transformation on the culture of our organization. So when we think about critique, you're walking into a meeting to give critique to a design team that's been working on research for 2 months, or one of your colleagues says, hey, would you mind having coffee with me and telling me what you think about my particular idea? It's helpful to break it into 4 stages. It's also helpful to think about who's giving critique and who's getting critique. So our first stage we're going to call contract, right? And it's the same for both the individual getting critiqued and the person giving critique. So whenever we start a critique, it's important. First thing, right, and this is traditional in any critical conversation, just make sure that right now is a good time to do it. Right? Sometimes it's not the right time to give critique. If people don't want feedback at that time, it's probably a good idea to delay it or reschedule it. The second thing that we want to do is make sure, if we're giving the critique, that we truly understand the context and objectives of the work. We want to understand the why of the work before we jump in and give the critique. What are you trying to do in this project? What's your ultimate goal? Because we want to make sure that we match our comments to whatever that goal is. And then finally, both of us have to have some sort of sense of, how much time do we have to do this, right? If you've got 5 minutes, take 5 minutes. Today, in fact, on my way to Kaplan, I was doing some critique of someone. I said, I have enough time to talk to you from when I leave the IIT tower to when I get to the Kaplan Institute. That's the amount of time we have for critique. Setting that up early in the contract phase ensures that expectations are met and people feel comfortable with how things resolve later on. Just make sure you have the conditions set. Very simple stage, but always the most important. In our next stage, the person who wants to get the critique, you have to summarize, right? You've brought someone there, they're going to give you feedback on your particular idea. You need to summarize, kind of what your idea is, how you arrived at it. So we always recommend bringing, and I'm using this term in a very liberal way, this idea of a boundary object, something to share, something to show. It's really helpful if it's a draft. It's even better if someone can mark it up or put a post-it on it, right? That's just a wonderful way to engage people in critique and say, here's what we're talking about, right? It moves it away from being about you and your particular perspective to the work itself. Very helpful. Then if you're getting critique, make sure that you summarize and focus on, this is one of those core things that we teach in design school, is this idea of progressive disclosure. Summarize the important high-level points and then get detail when required. We borrow a phrase from the world of journalism, don't bury the lead. This is something that I coach the students with all the time. Don't bury the lead. Tell us the most important thing first. Then if you're getting critique, show, don't sell. This is so important, right? This is not an infomercial where you're trying to get that individual to plunk down $19.95 for the idea. In fact, you want to be kind of sort of disengaged and very generic in your presentation so they're focused on giving you feedback on the particular idea, not your presentation. And while you're giving critique, this is your time to be listening, right? Be present and take notes. Try to understand the why of the idea. And I think this is some of the best advice that I've heard at this stage. When you're presenting something critique, always have this in your head. It is more important to be clear than it is to be right. Your job isn't to be right when you're getting critique. It's to be clear, so that you have a clear thing that you're asking people to give feedback on, so that when that feedback comes, it's valuable and useful. Now we're flipping, right? This is where, as the person who's getting the critique, right, you're going to listen, right? You're going to listen to what's being said about your idea. If you've been asked to give critique, this is where you start to question, right? Now what's important here is you're not directing, you're not necessarily telling. You're asking questions. You're asking the question, what if? What if we did this? What if we did this? Right? That's the way that we want to frame critique. Right? Instead of do this, ask what if you did this? Right? It's a very simple turn of phrase, but it can really help sort of transform how critique is seen and felt and used at your organization. So always, before you start, make sure, give a quick summary. This is what I heard. Is that correct? And then we always use the phrase wonder but don't wander, right? So ask questions, but don't get lost in crazy details. Make sure you're focused on going back to that, what that particular objective is. One of the things that is always hard, especially for students who are being critiqued for the first time, and when I used to teach in the undergraduate engineering program, this is always hard for students who may have gone their entire high school and good chunk of their college life without actually having critique. You don't want to hope for affirming critique here, right? If someone's getting, oh, that's nice, right? That means they may not have connected with it and they don't really want to help you transform it or make it better. What we're looking for here is negative or sort of critique that's about how do we change things, right? That's really valuable. So when you're getting critique, that's your litmus test about how much they're engaged and how good of critique you're getting. And it should be expected when we do this that you're getting constructive feedback about what you need to change. Always a difficult thing to hear first, but because you have this process, right, we've normalized how we give critique. So it feels part of the operations at an organization rather than something that's weird or outside of the norm. It's part of our work. And if you're getting critique, don't try to answer every question. You don't have to have a response for everything. When someone tells you, change this, you don't have to sort of fire back at them. Here's what I was thinking, here's what I was thinking. Instead, think about why the question was asked. What in your presentation wasn't clear enough, missed the mark, right, that would lead them to ask that question, right? So that's your job. Right? Think about, how what you presented led to that particular question. And then finally, there's the resolution. Like, how do we leave here? So if you're giving critique, we always love the DVF framework, desirable, viable, feasible. Right? This is, again, one of those frameworks, just like the 5E model. I guarantee you one of our students out at IT is using this right now. But it's super valuable, and it's a super valuable way to give feedback, right? Here's what I liked about your idea. Here's why I think it'll connect with a customer. Here's where it might be missing some business viability. Here's some of the feasible things. What if we did this to improve the feasibility? Try to make tangible suggestions. Don't say why you like it or you don't like it, right? That's never really helpful feedback. And if you're getting feedback, remember, you have the option to apply, deny, or modify what's being given to you, right? You can apply the feedback, right? Here's what we're going to do. This is great. We can use it right away. You can deny it, say, I'm probably not going to pay attention to that. Or you can modify it, right? You can start to modify it to say, here's how I might use this in this particular context. So these 4 steps to critique, if you operationalize it and do it over and over and train within your organization, you start to build a culture of learning. You build people who enjoy talking to each other. You create a new, going back to one of our other slides, a new mode, right? Where it isn't just a traditional meeting where you're sitting around and debating, but you're actually trying to make things better. And this is part of bringing a design culture that I think is so valuable to companies that aren't necessarily super advanced in design culture, because this element of the studio changes how people react, people relate, and it changes the pace of how work is done. So what I'm excited about is for everyone who has signed up, when you get sort of the email back from us later on, we will share with you a very quick PDF of our critique card. Right? So this is something that we have organizations print out and use, pass around, and it's a great way to kind of remember these particular elements. And even as someone who's given, so much critique being in a design school, I still use my card to think through, am I going through these stages, right? Even the most advanced practitioners, right? You want to make sure that you're hitting these stages, because sometimes you get a little too comfortable with your work and you sort of, you might drop off on the robustness of it. And if you're trying to help new people sort of get into design and design thinking, this is one of the easiest methods to help them think about, how do I give critique? So we'll be sending you this PDF card along with the emails. Thank you for all the work. And I really hope that everyone gets excited about and engages with us to help develop and think about these Academy course offerings. It's been so exciting to get to work with our partners so far, but we can't wait to see what happens next. And we think about the long-term impact of ID, we're going to continue to train, to educate, and produce the best graduate design students, MDes, MDM, PhD. But we want to bring this level of thinking and rigor also to companies. And we hope that through our partnerships that exist, and maybe some of the partnerships that can come from this talk, that we can start to build some great new ways to help companies and organizations implement these ideas. So thank you so much for spending your Tuesday afternoon with us. We've gone through a lot of content today. Both Anijo and I are always available for a talk and a chat, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you, everybody, and have a great afternoon.